Welcome back to Open Window Politics. Today we're going to be doing a prediction between Governor Gavin Newsom on the Democratic side to J.D. Vance, the current vice president, on the Republican side. So these are going to be all the swing states that I will characterize throughout the video. We'll start out on the West Coast and then go eastward. So I do think, the blue coast here, California, Oregon, and Washington, almost certainly going to end up in the Democratic column. And then we get to the state of Nevada. In Nevada, it's going to be interesting. They've elected Republicans and Democrats. I've heard quite a few arguments from you guys in the comments that a lot of Republicans are just people who are just don't favor what Gavin Newsom has been doing in California, have been moving to Nevada, and that they will generally vote more conservative. And I think that is a reasonable call. However, I just don't think that J.D. Vance would have the same populist appeal that appealed to some key voting demographic groups in Nevada that resulted in the Trump victory in 2024. The state went to Democrats in 2020 and even 2016. So I think that in the long run, it will probably get more and more Democratic. But I think for now, it would probably be a tilt for the Democrats. I do think it's going to be a different case situation in the state of Arizona. Arizona is interesting. It's the state that went to Trump of the 7 swing states by the biggest margin in 2024. This state actually ended up being in the lean category, which for reference would be like that. And it has fairly consistently voted for Republicans. They did vote for Biden in 2020 on the presidential level. Harris lost it by a pretty big margin in 2024. So it's going to be an interesting state. I think, like some of these other Sunbelt states, I do think in the long run it will become more and more progressive, leaning blue. So I'm going to go, but I don't think that it would be enough to overcome just the large lead Trump had in the state in 2024. I think it's possible, but I just don't know if there's a Democrat right now that could do it. Gavin Newsom, he might be considered by some between him and J.D. Vance to be the more moderate option. It's up to your interpretation. He's kind of tried to take a bit more of a moderate stance, but still quite a few people that would, really virtually everybody in the American presidential election already knows who they're voting for before they even know which candidate has the R or D next to their name. So that is going to impact, and I think that just the Republican lead in the state of Arizona would result in a Republican lean or tilt. I'm just going to go with tilt, but nonetheless, 11 electoral college votes in J.D. Vance's column. And we'll get here now to the other half of the Sun Belt. So we have the states of Georgia and North Carolina. I believe last time I called Georgia for the Democrat, in this case, Gavin Newsom. I think it's possible he could win. You guys brought up that Georgia, in the long run, might become more of a Democratic state, but for now, just has pretty consistent history of voting Republican. So I'm actually going to change my call on Georgia to end up in the Republican column. And with that, it's 262 to 232. Oh, I forgot. And then the little district there in Omaha in Nebraska, I could even see that being lean. It's most likely going to end up in the Democratic column. Even Harris was able to win it, and that was a pretty historically bad performance for Democrats. So probably going to be an easy vote for Gavin Newsom's column. And then I'll start out with Wisconsin and end with Pennsylvania. I do think that Wisconsin and I think Michigan is probably going to be one of the most swing states probably the most swing statey out of the 3 Rust Belt states. I think Wisconsin is probably the most likely to end up in the Democratic column, and I do think that Pennsylvania is most likely to end up in the Republican column. So that leaves Michigan. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's still a J.D. Vance victory, but I do think that if I had to call it, it would probably result in a tilt blue rating. Like I've said many times before, all of these tilt states could hypothetically flip unless, aside from maybe Minnesota and New Hampshire, will most likely be in the Democratic column. But with that, that brings us to 257 for the Democrat, Gavin Newsom, to 281 for the Republican, J.D. Vance. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to disagree or agree with me in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.